This is Dr. Rebecca Johansson, running and triathlon coach with the Performance Project. Today's sports science mini lecture is on exercising in the heat. The three main goals with heat adaptation are number 1, to lower your heart rate, number 2, decrease core temperature, and number 3, decrease rating of perceived exertion. So all of those goals would be what you want to achieve while exercising in the heat. So after you adapt to heat, your heart rate would be lower than while you were exercising in the heat before you adapted. And the same with core temperature, and the same with the decrease in your perceived effort. So really, when you achieve these three goals, you're going to improve your performances in the heat, which is what you want, particularly if you have races scheduled in summer or in a place where it's going to be very hot. There's a lot of physiological adaptations that happen as you adapt to heat. The first being increased plasma volume. So when you take a blood sample and you put it into a centrifuge, what you get is 55% of that blood sample is made up of plasma, 45% is made up of red blood cells, and less than 1% is made up of white blood cells and platelets. So when you adapt to heat, you're going to have an increase in that plasma volume, which is important because plasma makes up the majority of a whole blood sample. So when you have an increase in plasma volume, you're also going to have an increase in stroke volume and an increase in cardiac output. And this, in turn, helps to decrease your heart rate after you've adapted while you're exercising. So think back to that main goal of decreasing heart rate. So the increased plasma volume will help decrease heart rate. In addition, while you're exercising after you've adapted, you're going to have an earlier onset of sweating and an increased sweat rate. So the point of sweating earlier on in your exercise session and having an increased sweat rate is to help increase evaporative cooling. So as you sweat and air passes by your skin, that sweat evaporates off your skin, and it helps decrease core temperature and help you cool down. You're also going to have decreased sodium loss in your sweat, which helps maintain electrolyte balance, and you're going to have decreased skin blood flow. So if you have a large increase in skin blood flow, that's going to compete for muscle blood flow, which is the most important thing to increase while you're exercising. So if you have a decreased skin blood flow, there's going to be more blood flow available to go to those large muscles that need it while you're exercising. And in terms of time, you're going to adapt to heat quite quickly, so anywhere from 7 to 14 days after first exposure. And the more time you spend in the heat each day, the faster you're going to adapt. But the downside is that you lose adaptation after only a few days of not having any heat exposure. So you lose the adaptation quite quickly. So repeated exposure is required to maintain adaptation. So that's important to think about, especially for working people who maybe are exercising in an air-conditioned indoor space during the week, and then they're only getting outside on the weekends. Think about that if you're wanting to adapt. So I always tell my athletes that you want to maximize your adaptation without losing too much quality of training, right? So on day 1 of adapting to heat, you don't want to go out in the middle of the day and do your interval sessions, because then you're going to lose too much quality from your training sessions. So some practical tips for heat adaptation are to do your short, easy runs later in the day. So kind of in the peak heat of the day, depending on where you live. If you live in Florida, you don't want to ever run in the peak heat of the day. but save the interval sessions for early in the morning or late in the evening, and save the short, easy runs for hotter times of the day. The second tip is you can run early in the morning and then spend leisure time outside. So walking or gardening in the heat of the day. That's going to help increase that adaptation. The third tip is you need to hydrate well. So you're definitely going to need to increase hydration in summer, and you also should include electrolytes in your drink while exercising. So, for example, when I do my summer runs, I carry two 500 ml bottles with me. One is filled with ice water, and the second one I'll put a Nuun tab in for electrolytes, and that just helps with my hydration levels and helps with my electrolyte balance. And the fourth tip is keeping your core temperature cool. So this particularly comes into play when you're doing high intensity sessions and it's very hot out, or while you're racing in the heat. So getting ice water over the head and the back of the neck decreases core temperature much quicker than putting it over your extremities like your arms and legs. Filling a bandana with ice and wrapping it around your neck, and leaving an aid station like that, and then you can keep cool for relatively longer, or putting ice cubes underneath a hat. So those are some nice practical tips for heat adaptation. And remember, you always want to derive the most benefit from the least amount of stress.